This is happening right now in Jerusalem. The streets went silent. People left their work and looked up at the sky. Even reporters had no words. And when I tell you why, you'll understand what's truly unfolding. The mainstream media isn't covering this. They don't want you to see what's really happening, but the truth can't stay hidden forever. You're watching this because God wanted you to see it. Something in your spirit recognizes this moment as different. The ancient stones of the old city shimmered under the morning sun. The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky. Synagogues, churches, and mosques all stood in silence. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps. It was 6:47 a.m. when Rabbi Moshe ben Avraham emerged from the ancient study hall beneath the western wall. His weathered hands trembled as he held a scroll that had been sealed for generations. The morning light caught his silver beard as he whispered words that would echo through eternity. The time the prophets spoke of. It has arrived. Within minutes, other rabbis began appearing from hidden chambers throughout the old city. Each carried ancient texts. Each bore the same expression of wonder and reverence. They moved not with urgency, but with the deliberate steps of men who understood they were participants in divine timing. Rabbi Sarah Bat Miriam, one of the most respected Torah scholars in Jerusalem, stood at the entrance of her study center, her eyes fixed on the Temple Mount. "For 70 generations we have waited," she said to her students who gathered around her. "Today the waiting ends." The sound began as a whisper in the wind, not thunder, but something deeper, a resonance that seemed to emerge from the very stones of Jerusalem itself. Pilgrims from around the world stopped mid-step. Tour guides fell silent. Children playing in the narrow streets looked toward their parents with wide, knowing eyes. An elderly merchant from the Armenian quarter later testified, "I felt something I'd never felt before. It was as if heaven itself was pressing against the earth, trying to break through. This isn't hysteria. This is prophecy in motion. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it." Isaiah 2:2. But when the time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law. Galatians 4:4. My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? God is moving the pieces of the end times. The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. Today, something impossible appeared over the Temple Mount. The streets went silent. People left their work and looked up at the sky. Even reporters had no words. They don't want you to see what's really happening, but those with eyes to see cannot miss what's unfolding. Something in your spirit recognizes this moment as different. The ancient stones of the old city shimmered under the morning sun. The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky. Synagogues, churches, and mosques all stood in silence. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps. By midday, word had spread through the religious communities like wildfire. From the ultra-Orthodox neighborhoods of Mea Shearim to the ancient Jewish quarter, rabbis began to converge. But this was no ordinary gathering. These were the keepers of hidden wisdom, the guardians of mysteries passed down through millennia. Rabbi Eliezer Goldstein, whose family had maintained the ancient traditions since the destruction of the Second Temple, carried with him a manuscript his ancestors had protected through exile and persecution. "Of the signs our forefathers described," he whispered to his companion, "they are manifesting exactly as written." In the Christian quarter, Father Dimitri, an elderly Orthodox priest whose grandfather had served in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, felt an unexplainable pull toward the Jewish quarter. "Something is calling," he told his fellow clergy. The same voice that called Abraham, that spoke to Moses, that announced the birth of our Savior. The Islamic clerics, too, sensed the stirring. Imam Abdullah, keeper of traditions stretching back to the early caliphs, found himself drawn from the Al-Aqsa Mosque toward the gathering crowd. "What is written in the old books," he murmured, "about the end of days and the gathering of the faithful? It stirs in my heart." They heard a sound, not thunder, but a voice within the storm. Thousands ran, not from fear, but because something was calling them. A pilgrim from Australia said, "I felt the heavens touch the earth." This isn't coincidence. This is prophecy in motion. What the prophet saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. "Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand." Joel 2:1. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. Acts 2:2. The rabbis gathered in the ancient courtyard where tradition says the Sanhedrin once met. Their faces bore an expression of solemn joy, the look of men who had studied prophecy their entire lives and now witnessed its fulfillment. They spoke in hushed tones, comparing texts, confirming signs, their voices carrying the weight of thousands of years of expectation. "The time of preparation is ending," declared Rabbi Ben Avraham, his voice trembling with emotion. "The time of revelation has begun." My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? God is moving the pieces of the end times. The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. This is the preview of the greatest event in human history. Jerusalem stopped this morning for a reason no one can explain. The streets went silent. People left their work and looked up at the sky. Even reporters had no words. And when I tell you why, you'll understand what's truly unfolding. The mainstream media isn't covering this. They don't want you to see what's really happening, but the truth can't stay hidden forever. You're watching this because God wanted you to see it. The ancient stones of the old city shimmered under the morning sun. The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky. Synagogues, churches, and mosques all stood in silence. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones, the rabbis unveiled scrolls that hadn't seen daylight for centuries. These weren't ordinary Torah scrolls, but texts containing prophetic visions, mystical calculations, and divine appointments that had been hidden away, waiting for this moment. Rabbi David ben Solomon, whose lineage traced back to the temple priests, carefully unrolled a parchment his family had guarded since before the destruction of Jerusalem. "For the signs enumerated here," he read aloud, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "match precisely what we witness today." The scroll spoke of a time when the children of Abraham would gather from the four corners of the earth, when ancient wisdom would be revealed, and when the divine presence would begin to manifest more clearly in the holy city. Every detail described in the ancient text was unfolding before their eyes. Rabbi Miriam Bat David, renowned for her expertise in prophetic literature, held up another scroll. "Look here," she said, pointing to Hebrew characters that seemed to glow in the afternoon light. "It speaks of a generation that would see the beginning of the final ingathering, when knowledge would increase and the hearts of the people would turn toward Jerusalem." From every nation, pilgrims had been arriving in Jerusalem in unprecedented numbers over recent months. Tour guides reported that visitors often spoke of feeling called to come to the holy city, though they couldn't explain why. Hotel managers noted that many guests extended their stays indefinitely, as if waiting for something they couldn't name. They heard a sound, not thunder, but a voice within the storm, a sound that seemed to emerge from the very foundations of the Temple Mount itself. An old merchant said, "I've waited my entire life for this." A young mother from Brazil whispered, "My grandmother always said I would see the day when God would move in Jerusalem again." This isn't hysteria, this is prophecy in motion. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Behold, I will save my people from the east country and from the west country, and I will bring them, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Zechariah 8:7-8. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Luke 21:28. The scrolls revealed calculations based on ancient Jewish calendar systems, pointing to this very season as a time of divine appointment. The rabbis compared notes, their excitement growing as text after text confirmed the same timeline, the same signs, the same prophetic markers. For 2,000 years we have studied these words, said Rabbi Ben Avraham, his eyes bright with tears of joy. Today we live them. My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? God is moving the pieces of the end times. The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. This is the preview of the greatest event in human history. This is happening right now in Jerusalem. The streets went silent. People left their work and looked up at the sky. Even reporters had no words. They don't want you to see what's really happening. But those with eyes to see cannot miss what's unfolding. The ancient stones of the old city shimmered under the morning sun. The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky. Synagogues, churches and mosques all stood in silence. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps. As evening approached, something extraordinary began to happen. The sound that had been growing throughout the day, that deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, began to take on a melody. Not music as humans compose it, but something that touched the very core of those who heard it. Rabbi Yosef ben Levi, whose expertise in ancient temple music had made him a respected authority, stood with his ear pressed against the western wall. This is the sound described in the prophetic writings, he announced to the gathered crowd. The sound that was heard when the divine presence filled Solomon's temple. Pilgrims from around the world began to weep, not from sadness, but from an overwhelming sense of coming home. A businessman from London found himself kneeling on the ancient stones, unable to explain why. A grandmother from Kenya raised her hands toward the sky, singing praises in a language she'd never learned. The rabbis consulted their scrolls again, cross-referencing the timing with ancient calculations. Every indicator pointed to the same conclusion. The appointed time had arrived. The divine timetable, hidden in the mysteries of Hebrew letters and prophetic numbers, was revealing itself in real time. "Listen," whispered Rabbi Sarah Bat Miriam, "do you hear how the sound seems to be calling, not just to those present, but to souls scattered across the earth?" Indeed, reports were coming in from Jewish communities worldwide. In New York, synagogue attendance had suddenly tripled. In Buenos Aires, ancient prayers were being sung spontaneously in the streets. In Mumbai, families who had lost connection to their Jewish roots were suddenly feeling an inexplicable pull toward their heritage. They heard a sound, not thunder, but a voice within the storm. Thousands ran, not from fear, but because something was calling them. Something in the very frequency of the sound resonated with the deepest part of human souls, awakening a memory older than conscious thought. This isn't coincidence, this is prophecy in motion. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. "And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." Matthew 24:31. "In that day the Lord will thresh from the flowing Euphrates to the Wadi of Egypt, and you, Israel, will be gathered up one by one." Isaiah 27:12. A young rabbi, barely 30 years old, approached the elders with trembling hands. "The gematria," he said, referring to the mystical Jewish practice of finding meaning in the numerical values of Hebrew letters. The calculations our ancestors made about this day, they are exact to the hour. The crowd had grown throughout the day, but not in the chaotic way of human gatherings. People arrived with a sense of purpose, as if they had appointments written in their hearts. They came from every background: Orthodox Jews, Christians, Muslims, and many who claimed no religious affiliation but felt undeniably drawn to Jerusalem. "Something is awakening," said Rabbi Ben Avraham, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Not just in Jerusalem, but in the hearts of people everywhere. The great ingathering the prophets spoke of. It has begun." My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? God is moving the pieces of the end times. The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. This is the preview of the greatest event in human history. Today, something impossible appeared over the Temple Mount. Jerusalem stopped this morning for a reason no one can explain. The streets went silent. People left their work and looked up at the sky. Even reporters had no words. And when I tell you why, you'll understand what's truly unfolding. The ancient stones of the old city shimmered under the morning sun. The dome of the rock glowed gold beneath a clear sky. Synagogues, churches, and mosques all stood in silence. The same soil where prophets walked, the same streets that heard the Messiah's footsteps. As night fell over Jerusalem, the rabbis made their decision. Standing together in the courtyard where their ancestors had debated questions of law and prophecy for millennia, they prepared to make a declaration that would echo around the world. Rabbi Moshe ben Avraham, as the eldest among them, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of tradition and the fire of revelation. For generations, we have studied the signs. For centuries, we have calculated the times. Today, we bear witness to their fulfillment. The crowd pressed closer, sensing the historic nature of this moment. Phones captured the scene, though somehow the recordings would later seem to carry only a fraction of the power present in that courtyard. This was a moment that demanded to be experienced, not merely documented. "The time of waiting is ending," declared Rabbi Sarah Bat Miriam, her voice ringing clear in the night air. "The time of revelation has begun. What our ancestors saw in visions, we see with our eyes. What they hoped for in faith, we witness in reality." The other rabbis nodded in solemn agreement. These were not men and women given to flights of fancy or emotional outbursts. They were scholars, keepers of wisdom, people who had spent their lives in careful study and measured consideration. Their declaration carried the weight of their learning and the fire of their conviction. "We declare," said Rabbi Ben Avraham, raising the ancient scroll toward the star-filled sky, "that the prophetic timeline has entered its final phase. The signs written in our holy books, preserved through exile and persecution, hidden in mystical calculations and divine appointments. They manifest before us now." They heard a sound, not thunder, but a voice within the storm. The same sound that had been building throughout the day reached a crescendo, as if heaven itself was adding its voice to the declaration, a sound that seemed to carry across continents, awakening something in the hearts of people who had never set foot in Jerusalem but suddenly felt its call. This isn't hysteria. This is prophecy in motion. What the prophets saw thousands of years ago is unfolding before our eyes. "And it shall come to pass afterward, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions." Joel 2:28. "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come." Matthew 24:14. The declaration continued through the night, as each rabbi added their voice to the testimony. They spoke of signs in the heavens, of the regathering of the scattered, of knowledge increasing and hearts turning toward the holy city. They pointed to current events, to technological advances, to the spiritual awakening happening in communities around the world. "We do not know the day or the hour," acknowledged Rabbi David Ben Solomon, "but we recognize the season. We are living in the time the prophets foresaw. The great drama of history is entering its final act." As dawn approached, the rabbis concluded their historic declaration with ancient words that had been spoken for generations, but never with such conviction. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Blessed be his name, whose glorious kingdom is forever and ever." The crowd responded with such fervor that the sound seemed to shake the very foundations of the old city. People wept, prayed, sang, and embraced strangers as if they were long-lost family. Languages merged into one voice of praise and anticipation. "Now that you know this, what will you do about it?" Rabbi Ben Avraham asked the crowd as the sun rose over Jerusalem. "Are you ready for what comes next? While the world sleeps, God is calling those who are awake." My friend, can you feel this in your spirit? Do you realize we are witnessing what generations only dreamed of? God is moving the pieces of the end times. The veil between heaven and earth is getting thinner. What happened today stopped a city, but what's coming will stop the entire world. The rabbis have spoken. The scrolls have been opened. The sound from heaven has been heard. Until then, stay ready, stay faithful. Maranatha, the time has come.